Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk bugle, it's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's bugle 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BS and no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something?
Well, Corey, I sure wish that the audience could see the video that I see of you this morning. You look like you just got off a gurney or something.
A gurney.
Yeah.
I wish I was on a gurney. I have to still walk from point A to point B.
What the heck happened?
September.
Did you pack out that many elk, or?
I wish. We packed out some elk, but not near as many as I'd hoped and planned on.
Well, I thought maybe Donnie put you in the headlock or something. You guys were doing some fake wrestling up there on the hill over who got the first shot or something.
Up until about the end of September, I think I would have won handily, but he might have a chance now.
Really?
I'm nursing some pinched nerves and torn muscles and strained muscles and all sorts of neck and back stuff right now.
Well, there's got to be a story about how that happened.
Oh boy, there is a story. Do you want to start with the story, or do we want to go chronological and get to the story?
I kind of want to know the story of what happened, because I've been gone for the last 3 weeks, and I come back and I talk to you, and it sounded like you were at the hospital or something.
It did not.
He said, no, I'm just at home. Convalescing.
Convalescing.
Yeah. The term convalescing has an implication of old infirmity. So.
Yeah, I feel like I'm about 70, honestly.
Really?
But it's not from packing out elk or hiking, although I did both. I hiked about 170 miles in September.
Oh.
And yeah, we did a lot of hiking. I tracked everything this year, which is the first time I've actually tracked every single day that I've hiked, right at 170 miles, and all of that with a backpack on. So I worked out like crazy for the last year, was in good shape, had good nutrition program, and came out of it fairly good. But I did have some, stiff traps, and shoulders were a little sore just from packing weight and hiking so much with a backpack on. But
Yeah.
Isaac drew a pretty good tag, and so I spent a week hunting with him. And the first night we got out to the area, we had about 30 minutes until dark. And I said, if we hurry, we can get up to a glassing point and see if we can see anything and hear any bugles. And by hurry, I meant I'm on a motorcycle, cameraman John's on a motorcycle, and Isaac and his buddy Parker are on a four-wheeler. And the road is a good 2-track road with lots of boulders and rocks and quite a few water bars, Kelly humps across it to transfer the water from one side of the road to the other. And I'm familiar with the road, but not overly familiar as far as, knowing what each water bar would bring. And so I'm going along, and I'm riding the motorcycle too fast, and I have a backpack on, and I don't have a weapon or anything. So I feel like I can get up there first and do some glassing while Isaac's on the four-wheeler and cameraman John has the camera gear. And anyway, I'm going along and I'm gaining more and more confidence on these Kelly humps. And not to the point where I'm jumping them or anything, but I'm able to roll over them pretty smoothly without decelerating. And I don't know how fast I was going, but I was going too fast. And I even had the thought, I don't want to wreck and get injured out here. That would ruin Isaac's hunt for him. But I still wanted to get to the top of the mountain quickly. So I was flying along on the flat part, and there was a little water bar coming up. And by the time I realized that it dropped into a pretty abrupt ditch on the backside, I hit the back brakes and I was sliding and realized I wasn't going to stop. So I had to grab some front brake, which is always a little danger. But I've ridden motorcycles enough and I raced motorcycles. So I'm confident in being able to use two brakes at one time without doing too much. Yeah, without doing too much of an endo. But it still didn't stop me. And I slid into that ditch going a little faster than I would have wanted with the front brake deployed, and it caused the front tire to hit and immediately stop. And when it did that, I thought I could salvage what could have been a pretty bad wreck. And I did for the most part, but in doing so, my shoulder and, I was turned kind of sideways, the handlebars turned sideways, and I took the brunt of the force in my right shoulder. And I felt it immediately. It wasn't a pop, but there was quite a bit of stress and strain that transferred into that shoulder, and it twisted my back, my neck, everything. And so
this is like the bike, when you're talking about the shoulder impact on the ground after you left the bike?
No, I stayed on the bike, and that was the problem. Had I dismounted, I'd have probably been fine, but I stayed on it and basically did a bench press of the handlebars as they came back. And it hit hard enough that I had a bruise about the size of a volleyball on my thigh and hip on the right side where the handlebars finally connected with my leg. And in my defense, the bike didn't do more than just tip over. I kept it until all of that impact, and then I kind of just laid over to the side. But the impact shifted quite a few things in my spine and vertebrae, and a lot of muscles inflamed to protect that. And being young and energetic and full of, lacking wisdom like I am, I jumped right back on and headed up and pretended like nothing had happened. And for the next week, I carried a heavy pack and packed out an elk. And when I got home, I realized I couldn't turn my head from side to side like I should be able to, but I thought, a couple ibuprofen a day will take care of that. And so here we are 3 weeks later, and I finally went to a chiropractor yesterday, and he said, wow, you really messed yourself up. So, yeah. So that's why I've got a stiff neck, and I can't lift my arms above shoulder height.
Yeah. Well, you're the second guy I know who's been on a motorcycle wreck elk hunting this year.
Really?
Yeah. My buddy Bart May broke his foot, had surgery a week ago Monday, and his season's done.
Wow.
And he's one of those guys, I've ridden motorcycles all my life. This is what I do. All right. I haven't ridden motorcycles all my life. I owned a motorcycle for one summer. I wrecked it 3 times, and I sold it that fall. I'm like, that was a really good education. 1, I lived through it. 2, I learned a lot about physics and the human body. And 3, I realized what a bad investment a motorcycle is if you're going to crash it and sell it 4 months later.
Ooh, boy. Yeah.
It's a highly depreciable asset when the shoulder bars are bent and the headlights broke out.
The shoulder bars. That's exactly what they should be called. Yeah. When you put your shoulder through them, that's they're shoulder bars.
I took up hitchhiking after that.
Yeah. And hiking in general.
Darn.
When I was racing motorcycles, I wouldn't race after July 1st because I figured up until that point, if I wrecked, I could recover from just about any injury in the 2 months leading up to elk season and be ready for elk season. So even at a young age, I had wisdom. When I started
disappeared or something?
No, when I started hunting on him, I thought it's slow, even on technical trails with a heavy pack. It's, I'm not going fast enough to really get hurt. So, there's no concern there, but just being excited about a really good elk tag and wanting to be the first one up there to be able to utilize the last 20 minutes of daylight to find a big bull. I threw caution to the wind for a minute and did a little. I wouldn't even say it's an injury. It's just more of there's some strained muscles and some misaligned vertebrae, and the inflammation caused by that is keeping some muscles locked up and they won't let go, and that's causing a lot of stiffness and pain.
Well, sitting here looking at you in the video that the audience can't see, your head appears to be adjusted somewhere between where your head normally is and your right shoulder.
And I've always had issues with that. I've had back issues from shooting a bow so much. The right side of my back developed way more than the left side. Because I started shooting a bow when I was 8, and from the time I was 12 to 17, I shot. I couldn't even tell you how many arrows. It was my. It was what I did. I went to probably 12 to 15 archery tournaments from April through July every weekend. I shot hundreds of arrows every night. And so that's caused my back to actually, my spine is twisted slightly because my right side of my back is so much more developed. And that caused, developing that right side of the back pulled my right shoulder down. So my right shoulder sits lower. So that caused my head to kick to the side to compensate. So I was a chiropractor's dream for several years getting that worked on. And I've implemented a much more robust workout program that works both sides of my entire body and trying to get some symmetry back.
Well, I think we're going to have to do an Elk Talk podcast about Donnie and Corey wrecking mountain bikes. Because as you're telling this story, I'm thinking about the story Donnie told me of wrecking a mountain bike 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
You had one version of the story. Donnie had another version. And Donnie's version was that you led him astray. You gave him advice of how to technically descend on this really bad trail, and you said, just give her some juice on the corner and you'll be fine. And the next thing Donnie knows, he's doing cartwheels with a motorcycle between his legs.
Man, there's no truth to his story. That's, he did land on his head, so he probably doesn't remember things exactly like they happened, but no, he took a terrible spill on a very technical part of a very steep trail. But he didn't even get hurt, other than he does have PTSD now. And every time he got on the motorcycle this year, we were on a flat 2-track road, and he held his hand out flat to me to look at. And I'm looking at it going, what? I don't see anything. And he's like, it's shaking. I'm like, okay. And he's like, I still get kind of nervous getting on a motorcycle. He rode motorcycles, I think, his whole life. And he's just had a couple unfortunate tip overs that have damaged his mental ability to be confident on a motorcycle.
Well, we're good friends, Corey, but you're never getting me on a motorcycle. So
yeah, I did get one of your camera guys on a motorcycle one time, and
Dale came back. Yeah, he said, "I'm never doing that again. Don't ask me to do that again."
And that was if there were, class 1 being the easiest and class 5 being don't even try this. That was like not even a class 1. It was a single track trail, but there was nothing dangerous. There were no ruts, rocks. It was just an easy going trail through the mountains. So,
yeah. So, says the guy who's going to be responsible for buying a chiropractor's wife a new car.
I do have a good chiropractor, and he is very compassionate to my physical state.
But not to your pocketbook.
I mean, he's a good guy. And I found out yesterday, I've met my deductible for chiropractic care, which I didn't even know I was covered for chiropractic care through insurance. And now I've met my deductible, so it's $11 a visit. So,
well, there you go.
Yeah,
you might as well go there and drink coffee with him for that price. If he served you free drinks, you'd make out.
It's a 2.5. It's a 2.5 hour drive one way to see them. So,
well, that's what you get for living out in the sticks. But,
I know.
So,
no, it's all good. We've got a rifle hunt here in 10 days that I'm planning on leaving on. We rode motorcycles in there last week to check out the trail, and it's probably a class 4. So we won't be taking motorcycles in there. I wouldn't take Donnie in there on motorcycles. So we're looking at getting a hold of our friend Bo Beatty and getting some llamas.
Well, you might be too late, because I got 5 llamas sitting here in Bozeman, Montana, and rifle elk season opens on Saturday in a few days. And as quick as we get done with this podcast, we're packing the llamas and heading back into the bush. And
Nice.
we're bringing no motorcycles. People get hurt on. I have never heard of anyone getting hurt on a llama.
That is true. And horses are no better than motorcycles, and llamas seem to be the ticket.
I view horses probably with even more fear or trepidation than I do motorcycles, because I tell people horses are like a motorized transport that doesn't have a throttle mechanism, a brake, or a steering mechanism.
100% agree. Yep.
But I know all the horse people listening are laughing because they know how to operate a horse. I don't. The horse knows that I'm on there. He's like, oh, let's watch this. He tells the other horses, watch this. And he walks me underneath a bunch of low limbs or something. Or he rubs me right up against a great big fir tree and scrapes me off off one side of the saddle. And I think the horses all have a good laugh over it. Like,
they do. They are, they have their purpose, and there are some good ones, and there are some really good horse handlers. But I have very rarely heard of somebody that uses horses that hasn't had some kind of a rodeo at some point. And that's a rodeo that, the implications there can be pretty devastating.
Anyone who's done mountain hunting off a horse for more than 5 years is probably on a first-name basis with an orthopedic surgeon.
They're like bush pilots in Alaska.
Yeah.
It's like you will have an accident at some point, no matter how good you are.
So I'm sure the audience is humored by our modes of transportation and how in our, I don't know if you call it age or lack of wisdom, people get hurt. But you got any elk hunting reports? I only got one.
Oh, I've got several reports, and they're honestly, we've had some great hunts and some great encounters. But me personally, I think I only packed my bow 3 days, all elk season. Yeah.
Wow, Corey.
Just things got kind of, New Mexico kind of kicked things off. It was tough. I called for Donnie for 7 days there. Then we came back and we headed on our Idaho hunt, and cameraman John wanted to get a few days of hunting in. So I ended up going over early with him to call for him, meaning I would need to come back early. So it was going to cut my days of hunting, which, I was fine with. I thought, man, I'll get him an elk, then I'll get an elk, and then he and Donnie will stay, and Donnie will get an elk, and everything will be great. And just didn't work out like that. The first area we went to, we had one really good encounter. But man, there were people everywhere. And we're hunting, it's a motorized restricted hunting area. So that means you can use motorcycles to get back into an area and take your camp in there. But then you have to shut it off and you can't ride it around. Like, you can't hunt off of it. You can use it to pack camp in and out, and you can use it to pack elk out. And that's it. And we knew that. So we knew there would be some recreational riding going on, but there was recreational riding. There was illegal use of motorized vehicles for hunting. And the poor elk in there were just, they would run when they heard a bugle. They wouldn't bugle when they heard a bugle. We were hunting pressured elk. So we ended up relocating after, I think, 3 days, which relocating meant a 4.5 hour drive at midnight. So that kind of, that always ruins the next day because you're so tired. And so we and it rained the next day, so that day was kind of wasted. The next area we got into, there was an outfitter in there with 7 or 8 spike camps in every single drainage. And they'd been running multiple hunters through these drop camps for several weeks. So the elk in there were even more skittish than in the motorcycle area. So we relocated once again, and I had basically one morning to hunt after that relocation. And we got 4 inches of snow overnight, and I drove home about noon that day. So that was my hunting season. I mean, for me personally, packing a bow, I didn't fill a tag, but I did get a shot at an elk. And unfortunately, I have to live with that for the next year and figure out how to overcome that. But it was a really nice bull, and there will be video footage proving that even a guy who shoots his bow a lot can mess up at 20 yards. And
Wow.
so then I hunted with Jesse, and I hunted with Sam a little bit before we went. We didn't get into anything, and then I came back, hunted with Jesse. We had a great time. Called in 3 bulls to her one evening, and including one broadside at 8 yards that she was at full draw, came by broadside, and for whatever reason, she locked up and forgot to cow call and forgot to shoot. And it went by until it got her wind, and then it whirled and ran, and she never even got a shoot at it. But a simple cow call there would have stopped it, and it's been an 8-yard broadside shot. So,
Well, as a guy who's made that mistake a few times, I'm not going to comment at all. I'm just going to say, way to go, Jesse. Nice sportsmanship on your part.
Way to give the elk a chance. It's kind of like the warning shots, which we'll get into here in a minute. But we went on Isaac's hunt, and Isaac learned an incredibly valuable lesson about not setting up behind brush or trees. Very, very valuable lesson. Very painful lesson, because he was hunting an area that had some really big elk and a lot of elk, and those elk were not cooperating quite like we thought they would until this one particular elk that was probably the biggest elk we saw decided to cooperate. And unfortunately, it cooperated so well that Isaac held his bow back for 2 minutes and 12 seconds with a tree directly in front of him, and the elk directly in front of the tree at about 15 yards. So that's one that'll haunt him for a long time. But he did get an elk, and his lucky horseshoe is still firmly planted wherever it lodged after he sat down on it when he was younger, and it's not become dislodged yet. But I just texted you a picture of the bull that I'm referencing there, so you can ooh and ah over it, and the audience is going to have to wait until Destination Elk launches to be able to see that one. But
man, he's bugling, right? I see somebody's.
That's my head. That's my head.
And the bull is bugling that close.
And Isaac is 3 yards to my right.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So
that's a bummer.
Yeah. But,
that's a big one.
Yeah, it was a good one. So
Did he get one?
He got one, and it all worked out. And then we came home for 2 days. I hunted with Jesse again a little bit. And then we headed out. Archery season closed, and we headed out for our Outfitters for Hope hunt, and went right back in the same unit where Isaac and I had been the week before with Isaac's tag. So we had done a bunch of scouting, and all of the elk that we had scouted and seen mysteriously disappeared in 3 days. So we started over and finally found them and had an incredible hunt. Samuel was the young man's name. He's 14, from Pennsylvania. He's been through 2 bouts of leukemia. Oh. And his brother, Ryan, who is 17, came out with him. He was the bone marrow donor. and his dad, Ryan, also came out. We had an incredible hunt with them. Just, every year I have all these worries and concerns about conditions and, physical condition and needs and how we're going to get somebody in close to an elk. And I can't tell you how many times I would turn to Samuel and say, hey, there's a bull bugling up on that mountain. Do you think you can get up there? And without even missing a beat, he'd just smile and say, I can sure try. And he was on our heels the whole time. It was a lot of fun hunting with him, and great attitude. Shot a really cool bull, and we had I'll share it. I was going to say we have to wait till Destination Elk, but we I don't know if you remember. It's been, I think, 5-6 years ago. We took a boy out named Austin, and Austin had a brain tumor that was cancerous. And he shot a beautiful 7x8 bull at like 6 yards with the rifle. We called it in. His vision from the brain tumor, he couldn't see real well, and he couldn't find the bull in the scope at 6 yards, which I don't know that any of us could. But Donnie grabbed the barrel of the rifle and pointed it at the elk and said, pull the trigger. And he's like, I don't see it. And Donnie said, just pull the trigger. So Donnie basically eyeballed the rifle at 6 yards, and Austin shot the bull. And I still remember him standing over. I said, how big is it, Austin? He said, it's a 15-pointer. Being from Pennsylvania, he was taking full advantage of a 7x8 bull. But Austin unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. And I've been, stayed in touch with his parents, and we did a really cool film from his hunt. But his parents wanted to come out, and his mom never been to Idaho, and wanted to see where he had hunted elk and just be able to experience that. And so I said, well, we'll be out there on a hunt, so why don't you meet us at noon on Thursday of that week? So they rented a car and drove out and met me there. And first thing his mom said when she got out was, did you realize that it was, I think it was 4 or 6 years ago, today that Austin shot his bull? And I had Thursday was just a random day I picked during the week to meet him out there, and turned out to be the exact date that Austin had shot his bull. So kind of cool coincidence there. And then they came back to camp and got to meet Samuel and his family and talk about, all the challenges of having children with cancer and those sort of things. And as we were getting ready to head out for the evening, I said to Austin's parents, do you guys want to go out with us tonight and see if you can hear an elk bugle? And of course, they were 100% game as long as Samuel and his family were okay with it. And of course they were. So it was pretty incredible, but we called in a bull to 180 yards, and it stood over on a hillside and bugled nonstop. And it was just an average 5-point, but 180 yards away on an open hillside, it would bugle if I cracked a branch, if I raked a tree, if I cowbelled, if I bugled. If I did anything, that bull would bugle. And he just stood on the open hillside. Wouldn't come any closer, but we got a good show. And as I'm bugling back and forth with him, we hear a bull come over the back of the mountain bugling. And anyway, I'll save some of the details there, but it came down, and Samuel shot it right there 6 years to the date that Austin had shot his bull, and Austin's parents were able to stand right there and be a part of it. And so a really cool experience that, every year there's something that happens that makes us realize that there's more to elk hunting than just elk hunting. And this year was no exception.
Yeah, that's I watch those videos that you guys do that hunt that you do with those kids, and you almost want to watch it alone, because when you're done watching it, you get a little bit of moisture around the corner.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this year was, every year's a little different. The year Austin shot his bull, for those that have watched it, he's the one that said the prayer at the bull, and he was sobbing in gratitude for what we did, and praying that we'd be able to continue doing that for other kids with life-threatening illnesses. I mean, that's the one that you want to watch by yourself if you're gonna watch it, because it's hard to keep a dry eye. But this one on the mountain, we always there's some emotion there, especially depending on the family dynamics and everything. But there were a lot of people shedding a lot of tears on this one, just with Austin's parents there, and some of us were there for that hunt. With Samuel and the challenges that he's been through, and some of that, it was pretty emotional. And as you're walking up there's a dead elk laying there, and we're all excited about that, but at the same time you realize that the elk hunt is just the vehicle, and there's a lot bigger things going on and taking place, and a lot bigger lessons being learned than just shooting an elk.
Well, I appreciate you and all the other people who help out with that. That's amazing. And the difference that you make in some person's life and their family's life is you can't measure that. It's and for us it's a selfish thing because we get so much out of it. I couldn't not do it. No matter what, I would drop. And Donnie's even said, if I had to choose between a week of elk hunting for myself or going on that hunt, I wouldn't even think about buying an elk tag for myself. It's that special and that meaningful. And it's something we love to do. We still get to elk hunt. We still get to chase elk. We still get to bugle. But there's just so much more that comes from that. And so, there's a great group of guys that we're very fortunate. Russ Meyer, Tony Mudd, Donnie, and myself, and then cameraman John. I think all of us have been doing it since the first year together. And there have been other people that have, been able to join us for a year here and there, but it's by invitation only. Obviously, we can't get too big a group, and I know there's lots of people that want to be involved. But a few years ago, Tony Gilbertson won the men's division at the elk calling contest, and he came up to me and said, "Hey, I just watched Austin's film, and I want to donate half of my winnings to Outfitters for Hope." And I thought, man, that's incredibly generous of you. Would you want to come be a part of it? And he's like, man, I would have never even asked, but if you're willing and inviting, yes, I will be there. He ended up donating his entire winnings from winning the elk calling contest, and went on that hunt. And I think he would tell you it's been life-changing for him. But for him to be there, and Austin's parents to be there, and Austin to be the one that convinced him to donate the money and be involved in it, it just kind of came full circle for him there. So we've got a group of guys that they're phenomenal hunters. Tony Mudd just literally this year completed the Super Slam with a bow, killed all 29 species of North American big game with a bow, and did it. He's not a wealthy person. He just set out several years ago and set a goal and has been able to do that. Russ Meyer, if there was ever a time when there was a food shortage, he'd be the first person I called to go and get food for the village, because the guy is just a killer. Donnie, John, Tony Gilbertson, just all of us there. We love elk hunting, but at the same time, we all realize it's bigger than just elk hunting. So that group of guys, just getting to spend a week with them would be the highlight of a season. To be able to spend it with them on the hunt that we're on is just, we're incredibly blessed to do that. Well, glad you do it. Hope you keep doing it. And you're, like I said, one other thing. People will be able to watch that in Destination Elk out on the Elk 101 YouTube channel.
Everything that I've talked about will be on Destination Elk. Our plan right now is to do what we've done the last several years and launch it sometime in January. So won't be coming out right away, but it seems to be good timing for when the winter doldrums are setting in and you get some elk hunting excitement to get you through the winter and into spring. So New Mexico hunt, Donnie's New Mexico hunt, our Idaho hunt, where I had an opportunity and blew it. Isaac's hunt, where he had an opportunity and blew it and redeemed himself. The Outfitters for Hope hunt. And then hopefully, if my back and neck allow, next week we'll be going in and doing a backcountry rifle hunt, late season post-rut, and hopefully it'll be something there to include in Destination Elk as well.
Cool. Well, while you were doing all that, I was in the Yukon for 2 weeks, which
I
was
saw a
not elk.
picture. I
Yeah.
saw a picture, and it wasn't elk hunting,
No.
but it was pretty darn cool.
Yeah. There's these things called mountain caribou, which are it's a way different hunt than barren ground caribou. I mean, we're talking mountain hunting. It's like elk hunting, or in some cases, almost like sheep hunting. And their body size is bigger. You know, a good bull is easily the size of a cow elk.
Really?
Yeah. You know, the better ones are probably even a little bigger than a raghorn bull, body size.
Wow.
And they grow these crazy antlers. And I shot some grouse, and I shot a bull moose.
I was going to say, I saw a moose.
Yeah. So it was a fun trip. But before that, I was in Kentucky.
I was just going to say, I remember somebody had an opportunity to hunt the bluegrass state of Kentucky for elk, and you were assisting someone there on that hunt.
Yeah. So every year, and right now we're doing it. We do a win a hunt with Randy, where somebody draws Army out. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation does this, and we say, look, we'll do everything. You guys just coordinate it, and I'll give you at least a week of my time. I'll join the person. I'll do all I can to help them. If they don't want my help and they just want me there to, tell stories and cook, I'll do that too, If they want it filmed, we'll film it. If they don't want it filmed, we won't film it. So they always run it through November 1st. So I don't know when this podcast will drop, but if anyone's interested, you can go out to rmef.org, and I think it's like /win-a-hunt or something. If you just go to their website,
I think there's a banner on the main page there.
Yeah, but the fun part of it is we raise on average about $200,000 a year net for the Elk Foundation in doing this.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I can't write a $200,000 check. I'd love to be able to, but I can't. But if our platforms are able to do that and grow the membership of the Elk Foundation, I'm pretty excited to do it.
Totally.
And, anyhow, last year's winner was for a Kentucky elk tag. This is the last year that this property is going to be privately owned. As of October 1st, it became Kentucky Wildlife Management Area, owned by the state of Kentucky. And but the prior owner was a mining timber company, and they get X number of permits, and so they donate a bunch of their permits. And to get permits, you got to open your property to public hunting. So RMEF ended up with one of these donated permits and gave it to this guy. His name is Mike from New York. 76-year-old guy who was in fantastic shape. Yeah.
He was almost as old as you.
Almost, yeah. We sat and talked about who the first president was that we voted for. And the younger guys sitting around are like, really? Who is that?
Yeah, I've never even heard of that president.
Yeah. And so we had a great time. The downside is, and I was warned of this, that, Kentucky has had to really start hunting elk hard for a couple of reasons. One is the population has grown. The landowner, the damage complaints, because there's a lot of agriculture there. They've had to start hitting these elk really hard with hunting. These public areas, some of them have now grown up. In Kentucky, those reclaimed mines regrow in a hurry. And a lot of them have grown in with non-native plants. So the habitat is not nearly what it used to be. So we were warned this is going to be a really tough hunt. And anyone who thinks Kentucky is flat ground, I challenge you to go there. It may not be what we see in the Rockies, where we have elevation gains of 4,000 feet, from the trailhead to the top of the peak, but it's steep. It might only be gains of 600 to 800 feet, but it's steep. And worse than being steep, it grows some sort of, I don't even know what the heck it is, but it grabs a hold of your clothes and your pack and your everything else, and tries to steal it from you. So you're trying to walk through this stuff. And mind you, it's 85, 86 degrees with, I think, close to the same humidity level.
Wow.
So the bulls aren't real keen on running around all day in that kind of weather. But anyhow, we go to the spot that is one of these wildlife management areas now, open to public hunting. Run into a really nice young guy there. I think his name was Jonas. First day of scouting, and he didn't hear anything. I hadn't heard anything, and then I walked way out on this point where it drops down into this just terrible place, and I let out a bugle, and a bull bugled right below me in his bed. I'm like, oh, all right, let's not make too much noise here. Let's keep this one in our pocket.
Yeah.
So we went and scouted a bunch more places, and I think Mike was pretty excited. He's like, man, this Randy guy, the first call he makes, geez, he's a bull right there. And I mean, I'll be honest with you also. I thought, oh, this is like fish in a barrel here. This guy had no idea how quickly he's going to get shot tomorrow morning. So we went and just did a lot of scouting and, checking this spot, checking that spot. And one thing I noted is how few tracks I was seeing, really nothing in the way of rubs, or it's like, man, if there's a lot of elk here, they fly around because you think you'd see some tracks.
Yeah.
It seems like it rains about every other day. And so there's all kinds of mud. You'd think you'd see fresh tracks, but we didn't see much. So opening morning, we go, well, we know where one is. We're going out there. We go out there, and we kind of hunt our way out there. It's about a 2-mile hike out there through this jungle brush. And we get out there, and I let out a couple cow calls and nothing. So I use my tube, make it a little louder, and all of a sudden a bull bugles further down in that hole below us. But there's this rock rim that, if you can just visualize this big, long point going out there, and they'd taken the top off the mountain for coal mining. And now it's regrown with stuff that's 20, 30 feet high. And we're trying to navigate through that while this face that faces north, they're down in this north bowl. Obviously, it's hot. They're down in those places. It's probably 60 or 70 feet of sheer cliff. And I'm like, we aren't calling that bull up this cliff. I think they're flying around here because they're not leaving any tracks, but I don't think he's flying up here. And so Mike, his brother Tim was with, another super great guy. I had so much fun with these guys, such wonderful people. Had the great attitude of just, man, I'm in Kentucky and I got an elk tag. What more could I ask for? And so I tell them, I'm like, we got to drop off this ledge, find a way to get off this face and get down on the next bench. So we do that, and we get down to the next bench. Well, by now, the thermals are completely different and messing us up. They had been coming down this drainage to our right, and so we kind of had a crosswind. But now when the sun got higher, the thermals are, the way all these fingers come together. I'm standing there, I'm like, this wind is so squirrely. It's half the time it's this way, half the time it's that way. Told Mike, I said, you know what I think we're going to do? We're just going to sit right here, and this afternoon when the shadows come into this drainage and the thermals are predictable again, we're going to drop down and get that bull. And it's about 400 feet of vertical down into this absolute mess.
Are you able to glass anything at all? Like, are there any openings? It's just all solid.
You do not need binoculars to hunt in Kentucky. That's just added weight. Or because you're in the habit of glassing over to those trees that you can see way over there through a little hole in the trees you're standing in. There's no place you could glass more than 60 yards, 70 yards. Wow. That was a long distance. And so anyhow, we're sitting there, we're kind of taking our naps, and every once in a while I'd let out a cow call just to see if this bull would respond, and he would. He's bedded. And at the same time, just, didn't really give out anything. So it gets to be about 4:30, 5 o'clock. shadows. There's a song about Kentucky. It says where the sun comes up at 10 in the morning and goes down at 3 in the day. It's true.
Really?
Because of how steep these haulers, they call them. We'd call them coulees and canyons. They call them haulers. The shadows come real quickly. And so we get up and we start easing the direction over to where I think this bull is. And I'm trying to locate if they'd moved to this big water hole that they're like a dike someone had built there. And little did we, well, while we're taking our nap, we hear some ATVs down below us. I'm like, what? My map doesn't show an ATV trail down in that canyon. And, well, in the bottom of every canyon, someone has created an ATV trail and a side-by-side trail. And I'm like, it's not good. I think those guys are closer to that bull than we are. And so I'm thinking, well, I better call to get a location on this bull. And if we do, we better hustle. I told Mike, I said, if he bugles, we're just going. Well, sure enough, I let out this squeaky little bugle and he responds immediately. I'm like, come on, we got to figure out our way down here. And we don't get 50 yards off this bench we're standing on. And all of a sudden, boom, whack. Some other guy, this is a mistake on my part. Some other guys, and there were probably, I don't know, a dozen other hunters in there, in this general area. They had been sitting there, listening to me keep this bull somewhat located during the day. And so they drive underneath in their side-by-sides and walk up and shoot him.
Man.
It's like, well, and we drop down enough to where we can hear them talking. And there you can use radios and stuff, so they're radioing their buddies. And all of a sudden, it's like a swarm of side-by-side. Maybe it was only one. It sounded like a whole swarm of them. But we hear them talking down there. It's so still. We can hear everything. They're like, yeah, someone's got to go kill that great big bull up on the ridge there. And I think they were talking about us. So, yeah. Hey, that was a bummer the first day. And then the next day, we did not hear an elk. We didn't see an elk. We didn't see an elk track.
Wow.
And in this country, I mean, these guys are really giving it an effort. They're putting on anywhere from 6 to 8 miles in this jungle brush and walking these trails and other places. So I give Mike and Tim all the credit in the world, and they are smiling the whole time. It's like, you know what? This is the kind of hunt that if you had somebody with you who was a sourpuss, kind of a every day's a bad day, this would not have been any fun.
Yeah.
And so then day 3, we sneak around this bench kind of where we'd had that encounter with that one. And in the dark, I'm like, all right, we're going in the dark. And we didn't hear any ATVs. I think everybody hunts the weekend and then they quit. Because we never saw another hunter after that opening day. And we go in there and do a couple bugles and get a response. I'm like, all right, let's move in on this guy. He's actually above us, and it's morning, and we got a downhill thermal. We're killing this bull. He is as good as dead. And so we sneak around this nose, and we're on this bench. Like, and when I say bench, what it is there's these terraces where they go and scrape either a roadbed in, or they just scrape some coal out of there. And they're grown up. They're oak trees in there 40 feet high already, but it's a flat spot and it has a little bit of visibility. So we sneak around the point of this big ridge, and I'm like, I can hear him up there. He's gonna come down here, and he'd just walk around up there like 150 yards above us, and he'd bugle at us. And I'm like, damn it, how do I get him to come down here? And because we've now got this really steep face that we'd have to climb up, and it would be so noisy. And so we played with that guy. He didn't sound like a big boy, but maybe he was. We never got a glimpse of him. But if I'd bugle, he'd quit. he just, the next time I'd hear him, he'd be far off, and I'd cow call a little bit, and then next time he'd bugle, he'd be real close. So I don't know what I was doing wrong there, Corey. I almost called you.
You should have.
Corey, I got a bull at 150 yards.
What do I do?
What do I do? And
well, based on what you just told me and the little bit I know, quit bugling and keep cow calling.
That's pretty much what I did. It's like, you know what, Randy? You don't have to be Einstein to figure out that he's afraid of your bugles. So that's what we did. And then we tried we call it the cow party, where you sit down and you just make a lot of cow calls, see if you can get him to come in silently. So the only direction he could have come in based on where these cliffs are was over to our southwest. So I set Mike up over there, and I dropped back about 100 yards. And I just cow called. And I thought, well, if he's afraid of things, maybe he'll just get down on this bench we're on. He'll come and sneak in. And maybe he snuck in and looked, and we didn't see him. Because you could hear, amongst all the white oak acorns, I call them. Acorns dropping. It was like raining acorns. But every once in a while, you'd hear a rock slide or something that's like, okay, an acorn didn't do that. But never saw him. Never got eyes on him. Stayed there most of the day. Didn't see an elk, didn't get a shot. And then we went to another spot in the afternoon. Got another bull to bugle. But he was so far away. I'm like, was that a bugle? And Tim, the younger brother, he's got better hearing than me and Mike. He's like, yeah, that was a bugle. But it was late in the day, and we couldn't really get him to respond again. And we kept going back to those places where there were some characteristics. Anything that was heavily shaded, protected to the north by a southern ridge, that's where all the elk were. What little sign we saw, that's where they were. And I wish I could say that Mike got a shot at a bull, but he didn't.
Wow.
And I would say it's some of the hardest elk hunting I've ever done. The numbers are way down, and we ran into a couple people. They're like, oh, too bad you didn't get allocated or assigned or whatever it is to one of these real limited entry places. Those bulls are dumb. They don't get any hunting pressure. Hey, you'd shoot one right away. Well, that wasn't our situation. This was hunting land open to the public. Everyone who drew a tag for that unit could be there, and a lot of them were there. The opening morning, it was it sounded like a stock car race, man. People warming up their side by side. But that's how it goes.
Yeah.
That's public hunting. I felt bad though, because Mike had driven all the way down, and when you hear Kentucky, you think about, big bulls.
Limited entry. Like it's hard to get a tag, so they've got to be just everywhere.
Right. Yeah. But these enrolled properties that have, I don't quite understand it, but you get more tags if you jump into one of these. They call them wildlife management areas, but they're really private property that are part of a wildlife management property group. So those ones get a lot of pressure. Anyone who had the tag in this big region could come there. And it was known that that's where most of the elk in this region were. And so most of the hunters were there. So I don't know that I'm applying for Kentucky anymore.
No. Well, maybe a different zone or something. But
well, maybe. It's really cool country. It was so fascinating. I had a blast. I feel like I learned a ton about the history of how that landscape got formed, how it became elk habitat, all those kind of things. But if you think you're going to go on one of these general draw tags in Kentucky and you're going to walk out there and there's just going to be bulls walking around in open areas,
not the case.
All the locals are like, oh, too bad you weren't here 10 years ago. All this stuff wasn't growing up like this. And they weren't shooting many. Yeah, you see that little ridge right there? That where it was wide open. I shot a 7x7 there 12 years ago. I'm like, really? Oh, yeah. But, man, it's too bad you guys are hunting around here. There's some other places that are a little more restricted. It's too bad. I'm like, well,
It's too bad.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. So, anyhow, it was a ton of fun. Two great guys who gave it just a really, really good effort for how hard the conditions were. Full moon.
Oh, yeah.
Hot. The last day we hunted, the temperature up where we were hunting on his truck registered 87 degrees.
Oh, my goodness.
And, yeah. So at night, it was getting down into the high 50s. Well, the elk don't hardly even get a time of day where they could go out and be rutting and carrying on when it's that hot. And so I asked some people, is it normally this hot in early October? And they're like, no, it's usually we're talking low 70s. I'm like, okay. So I chalked that one up to lesson learned. I told Mike that if ever he draws a tag out west, let me know. I'm going to just drop what I'm doing up. I'll offer to come and help him pack out a bull wherever else he draws a tag, because I just feel bad,
Yeah.
That's the first sweepstakes winner where we've had that we didn't end up shooting a bull, and I feel bad.
Yeah.
So I'll make it up to him somehow.
Maybe I could win a Pennsylvania tag and you could take me on the sweepstakes hunt there.
I'd come along and cook. I ain't coming along and calling.
Why? I heard that in Pennsylvania, they're like, you just shut a truck door and they come running.
Okay, maybe that's how it is. I'll bring my truck. We'll slam the door a couple times.
I heard the same thing about Kentucky before you went, though, too. So now I'm starting to wonder, are these eastern states there's obviously big elk, and I think there's units there that are good, but there's some of those that are...
We Army F knows this guy down there who helps a lot of their hunters. His name is Don. He's an outfitter, actually. And he was a super big help. He's like, oh, man, I wish you guys were hunting the unit my tags are for this year. And he came over to the Airbnb we rented. He's like, boys, if you get one, you will have earned it in this spot.
Wow.
I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, I'm just trying to set your expectations properly. And he gave us a lot of pointers, things to think about. And it was a super big help. But that's how it goes.
Yep.
And so whoever wins the sweepstakes this year, what we do is we just apply for them in all the western states and till they draw. And then when they draw, we go. So
what about Idaho?
You're disqualified.
What about Idaho? Do you have them try to buy an over-the-counter tag? Well, it's called over-the-counter.
We've had people who said, hey, we'll just go hunting over the counter in Colorado. I'm like, why don't you try a second year of drawing? So I give everybody a mulligan, man. If you end up not drawing, let's try it again. Let's if you win a sweepstakes, you hope that you don't have to hunt over the counter in Colorado, or in Idaho. So
I just bring that up because we're approaching the December 1st date, and that's when non-resident over-the-counter tags go on sale in Idaho, and they have the great tag race where you get assigned a random number in this over-the-counter process, and your random lottery number determines when you get to purchase your tag. It sounds an awful lot like a lottery draw, limited entry type of a thing, and I haven't heard that they've changed it, which I can't believe after the last 2 or 3 years the process that it's been that they haven't changed it. But well, the guy this year actually lives in Idaho. The guy who drew 2 years ago. So we applied him the last 2 years, and he said, well, why don't we just go hunt a general tag in Idaho? I said, well, we can do that if that's what you want to do, but I'd really like to do it one more year. Can you hang with me one more year? He's like, yeah. I said, but if we don't draw in New Mexico or Wyoming or somewhere next year, let's just do Idaho. I live here. I've never shot a bull. I think he said he's never shot a bull. I just love to go somewhere here in Idaho. Man. I'm like, all right. If that's the case, we'll go rent some llamas. We'll set up a heck of a good camp, and we'll try to find one. Yeah.
So we'll see.
Nice.
But that's the other reason we have a November 1st deadline, is because of your Idaho thing. If somebody was just dead set that they wanted to do this sweepstakes hunt on an Idaho general hunt, we will announce the winner and notify them before the December 1st Idaho deadline. So that would be an option. But I've tried to talk them out of that.
Man, I would hope so.
Not for any reason other than I hope they can draw somewhere else.
I hope there's somewhere better than an Idaho over-the-counter general tag to be able to go on a sweepstakes type of a hunt.
Yeah. So, but we'll see. It's just a ton of fun. I've been so lucky, Corey. Everyone who, a lot of people get asked to do sweepstakes hunt, and most people decline, and they're like, how do you dare do that? You could end up with a real jerk. It's like, yeah, I could, but you know what? Everybody who we've ended up with has been just an absolute gem of a person. I consider them friends, and we stay in touch. And when you help somebody get their first bull elk, like we have quite a few of these people, it means a lot more to me than if I were to go shoot another elk.
Totally.
And
I've only done, I think, 2 or 3 giveaway hunts, but same with us. We've been so fortunate. The guys that we've got to go with have been just incredible and a lot of fun. Like I say, it's just so rewarding when somebody's grateful. Whether they've shot 1 or 100, when you get to go and be involved and they're grateful for that opportunity, I think I'm with you. I'd rather be with them and do that than go and hunt that same area myself. Yeah.
And if everybody enters and, becomes an RMEF member or upgrades their membership and you don't win, well, you're supporting conservation too.
Totally.
So it's, I think the total value of the package they said on their website this year is a little over $18,000.
Wow.
Because there's this huge gear package from all my partners, the normal ones who are always donating. And so if, Mike didn't get an elk, but he got an awful lot of gear out of the deal. So,
so I have a question for you. Speaking of Kentucky and it being super thick, you're hunting there during the rut.
Yep.
And it's tough to get an elk in to even shoot with a rifle.
Yep.
Where I'm planning on going in 10 days, it's going to be post-rut, transitioning into late season. Mm-hmm. And it is brutal nasty to get in there. Yep. And once you get in there, there's no openings. Mm-hmm. How do you hunt that?
Well, it sounds like just the pure fact that it's a sanctuary.
Oh, there'll be elk there.
Yeah. So you got a sanctuary, right? You know that the bulls are going to be there because of distance, topography, everything else. But they wouldn't be there if there isn't some sort of food, if there isn't some sort of water. So they will be there based on they can satisfy their other needs, but they're going to be hanging out in true sanctuaries. And if there's no glassing areas, when's the first day of the season?
It's already open, but we're going on the 28th of October, and it closes on the 3rd of November. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I was going to say, like this week, Montana opener is the earliest I ever remember it being October 21st. At least the first day, there's going to be a little bit of bugling action. Yeah. And then when all the gunfire starts, it's like, no, man, I'm not going to be doing that anymore. Old Jack, he got the bugling over there, and he died of lead poisoning this morning. So that's what you're talking about is probably why I say a post-rut hunt is the toughest time to kill elk, highly pressured elk on public land. Because if they smell people, if they hear people, they're not coming out of their beds until that last little bit of daylight, or they're not going to stay out very long in the morning, except for that first little bit of daylight. And then they're heading back into the deep timber, and it's just really, really tough. And so I wish I had any.
It's so thick and so steep that you can't get a vantage point. You can't see any openings. I'm afraid. I mean, I think the water, they're getting moisture. There was 4 inches of snow there last week, so they don't have to go to a water hole or a water source necessarily to get adequate water. It's just.
Is it just you, or do you have a camera guy following you around?
Camera guy and Donnie, both Donnie and I have a tag. So.
All right. Well, that triples the amount of movement and the amount of noise.
Yeah.
So that's why I do so much of my post-rut hunting glassing. Yeah. And I know you're saying there's not places to glass. It's like, okay, is there an avalanche chute? Can I look across into an opposite slope? Is there, some place where I know they're going to be traveling from a bedding to a feeding area where they're going to cross a little opening? And I know some people are like, well, that's not fun. That's like needle in a haystack. Well, I get that. But there's a reason why these bulls are so hard to kill in the post-rut period. Because they find places like you're talking about that just don't lend themselves to effective glassing or call. It's too late for calling to really work. The places they're going to bed, one guy sneaking up in there is hard. They're going to bed in some place that either rock or scree or brush. They're going to hear you coming.
Yep.
And the other thing about that bedding area, it's going to have a quick exit for them where they're going to stand up. They're going to say, that's danger. Boom, they're out of there.
3 steps and they're gone. And it's going to take me an hour to get over to where they just were.
Yeah. And so you might hear them leaving, but you're probably not going to get them, get a sight of them leaving. The other part is these beds where they choose to bed in these sanctuary areas, they know what the wind currents are doing. They find these little spots where the wind swirls and curls because, okay, there's a drop in the ridge line and it's the shade. It's right on the edge of the shade. So you got the mixing of the uphill thermal and the downhill thermal. You got, no matter where the wind comes from, they know, okay, they don't have a compass where they say, oh, that's a east wind, I'm going to bed here. But they know what an east wind is, and they know the little pockets where when the wind's out of the east, bedding here, with the swirl and everything else, this bedding spot is way better on an east wind than that one over there that's way better bedding in a northwest wind because of what the wind swirls do and the way the thermals mix and everything else.
Funnels, they get it to where anywhere you try to approach, it's just funneling that wind right down to them. And
and that's what makes it so hard to kill them, even though you got a rifle in your hand.
Yeah.
And you know what I always tell, my answer to that when people say, there's no place to glass, there's no place to this or that, I'm like, go find a different area.
Yeah, but there's elk in here. And that's they go in there from all these surrounding areas. And you can glass from 2 miles away in these ribbon cliffs. And they'll be right above the cliffs. There's a little bench just all along this canyon. But you can't, if you go in above them, you can't see down into that bench. You can't come in from below them because it's just cliffs. So you have to come in from the side, and it's just this flat, cliffy bench area that is thick with brush. And your only option really is just to slip along quietly and hope that you can spot one laying there 40 yards ahead of you in the brush. And which you know how that is. Unless you have a rainstorm or a solid wind to cover your sound, they're going to hear you. And
if you luck out and you get 4 inches of fresh snow or something, sometimes that makes it quiet enough. But they're just smart, and about the time you're going to be in there is when they start going from their solo post-rut mode to grouping up into bachelor groups in the late season. And now you got 3 or 4 of them bedded in the same general area. Yeah, they're all bedded in a different. If you've ever watched how elk bed, some of the elk bed a little bit further off, like 30 yards off. Why? Because there's a different vantage point there, or there's a different wind pattern there.
It's almost like they're working as a team against us.
Imagine that, right? They've figured out from wolves, from lions, from bears, from humans, if we spread out a little bit and we all look a certain direction, listen a different direction, and give ourselves a slightly different wind direction, the odds are one of us are going to smell, see, or hear this. And the other part of that is it's not like if one of them sees, smells, or hears something that the other three just lay there and say, Jackie, if he doesn't know what he's talking about. Even though Jack might be considered the village idiot, when he stands up, the other three bulls just take off. They're like, you know what? We're not going to
stand and look.
Yeah. And that kind of gets bred out of them, right? The ones that stood around and looked ended up getting a victory lap in somebody's Dodge Ram, and they're sitting on someone's wall back home. So that trait of standing around and looking,
it doesn't get bred into the next generation.
No, Darwin says that trait's going to go away pretty quick. So what you described, Corey, is probably the most difficult hunting. I think it's harder than archery hunting.
Yeah.
At least
archery
in
hunting to me is easy. Like, seriously, as far as locating elk, which I think is the hardest thing to do. Once you locate elk, you can hunt them no matter what the weapon is. But when you're archery hunting, you typically are hunting during the rut, and it's not that difficult to locate elk because they bugle.
Yeah.
And this time of year when they're going, and they're still bugling a little bit. We've heard, when I had Sam out last night, we heard a distant bugle, and because my ears are ringing and my balance is a little bit off because of my neck stuff that's going on, I couldn't tell what direction it'd come from, but we did hear a bugle last night, one single bugle, and we actually spent an hour and a half within 150 yards of a bugling bull on Monday morning with Sam. But it's just so thick, even in that, within bugling, we couldn't get a shot. And he had cows, so we couldn't just go busting in, and ended up not getting a shot. But you get into that late season, and that's the thing that concerns me, is how do you find those elk? And if you can't glass them, it's, they're there, but you still have to figure out a way to find them.
Yeah, and if you go in there looking for tracks or beds, there's a really good chance you bump them.
Yeah.
And now they're 2 or 3 drainages over some other direction. So
and even more wary.
Yeah. So I just always try to find, even in the thickest thick stuff, it's like, okay, is there an avalanche chute? Is there a little toe to the nose of a ridge where the timber's blown down and there's a little grass growing up? Because they don't need much in the way of forage to get through this post-rut period. And then they'll start going into areas where there's some more maybe timber cuts or burns or something that creates some edge areas that give them a little more forage opportunity.
Yeah.
But you should pick a worse time.
Yeah. I don't know if I can.
I was going to say, you'd be hard pressed to find a more difficult hunt of what you're fixing to do there.
Nice. That's great.
Which is why I'm going for the Montana Rifle Elk Opener this weekend for 4 days, me and Jace. But then we get to the last part of October and the first part of November. I deer hunt then. Like, I wait for these bulls to get back into their late season mode, and they bachelor up. They start staying out a little later. They start staying out a little longer, or coming out a little earlier in the afternoon. They have a greater demand for food because it's later into the season. The temperatures are colder. They've been rutting and not really eating much. Their behavior starts changing, and they're in groups of 3 to 8. So it's a lot easier to see one of them. One of them will be dumb enough to stand up and take a leak or something in the middle of the day out of their beds, and you might catch a glimpse of them. And so that's why I wish I could tell you that I do a lot of elk hunting the last weekend of October, first weekend in November. I do, and I've shot elk there, but it's tough sledding.
Yeah. Like you say, once they come out in that open stuff, it's, you can almost pattern them during that little bit later in the season. They're going to come out on an open ridge at 4:00 in the afternoon, and the next day, unless they get pushed, they're going to be right there in that same place. But when they aren't coming out in the open and they're just hunkered down waiting for the season to change and the pressure to leave, I'm looking, I mean, we're trying to figure out the best way in there. We tried 2 different ways on motorcycles to get somewhat close, and it's just not feasible. Plus, by then, we're probably going to have snow. So riding a motorcycle on a single track through the mountains in snow is not going to be the way to do it. Llamas sound great, but there's no pack trails going into there. It's just bushwhacking. And so that's my next, between now and the end of next week, I've got to go in there and bushwhack and see if there's an open ridge or something that we can at least cut out with a little chainsaw and get llamas partway in there. It's just far enough. It's too far to day hunt. And it wouldn't be very fun to pack an elk out of there on your back. So llamas become the next best thing.
Yeah. How far, when you say too far to day hunt, if you had to put a distance on that, and I know it depends on bushwhacking versus walking trail versus steep versus flat. 5 miles is like...
As a crow flies, it's about 4 miles. Hiking in there, the paths that I've been kind of drawn up the ridge, that if we can get on a ridge and kind of navigate the ridges to get back in there, true distance is probably going to be about 6.5 miles.
Yeah. Well, where I'm going is one of the most heavily hunted units in Montana. But by going in 5 miles with llamas, I'm thinking we're going to thin out most of the day hunters, the weekend warrior types.
Yeah.
And we're going to use that hunting pressure from the folks who might go 2 or 3 miles. We're using that as our kind of hunting tactic.
Yeah.
All right. These guys, about an hour before legal shooting light, car doors are slamming, guys are burping and farting and, you know, walking in their headlamps and talking, and they all know what's going on.
Yep.
And there's a few saddles and trails that I know of that go through some areas that I think, and we're not looking for big bulls, you know. I like Jace, the camera guy. I told him, you're the shooter. You film everything, and once the bull shows up, I'll point
grab the camera.
But Jace is like, look, I'll shoot a cow. You know, in Montana right now in this unit, because it's they just say it's too high of over objective. They let you shoot a cow or a branch antlered bull.
Well, can't they just bring in more grizzly bears and help with the population?
No, because we're exporting all those to Washington.
Oh, that's right.
Other places.
That's right.
If we're going to have an eBay auction, hey, this lot of 40 grizzly bears, who wants to take them?
Yeah, I was going to say, Washington only wants 10. If I was giving them grizzly bears, I'd be like, you have to take at least 100.
Exactly.
Minimum order quantity.
Yeah, 0 or 100.
Yep.
And we got 100 of them.
We'll round them up.
Yeah. So this spot where we're going, I just know it's going to be a ton of hunting pressure, and that's why I'm going in a couple days early. It's like, I want to get in there. I want to get my camp set up, and I want to know exactly what has changed since the last time I was in there 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and see it happens. Yeah. It's you know, a lot of people will challenge us and say, "Oh, you do these limited entry units all the time." No, not all the time. I mean, last year we did general units in Wyoming. This year we're doing general units in Montana, and you will be hard pressed to find a more pressured area than where we're going. I'm like, all right, we'll take your challenge. Yeah. We'll see if we can find one. So,
well, this area that I'm looking at going into, it's not. I mean, I haven't shot an elk yet this year, so I'm looking to put meat in the freezer, but at the same time, you don't go back into an area like that and shoot a spike. So,
yeah. Well, if you need some meat in your freezer, I have this moose from the Yukon.
Ooh.
That those things are big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an axis deer, so I'm covered for a while. They aren't as big as an elk, but man, they're good. Everybody always said they're better than elk meat, and I don't know that I'd say they're better than elk meat, but the burger we had ground up got mixed with 15 or 20% pork fat, and when you do that, it's hard to find something that tastes as good as that burger does.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, so I'm bringing another freezer into the office here. I did not.
Community freezer. All your camera guys can grab moose meat whenever they need it. And
that's I shot an antelope, and I don't bring that to the office. I shot an antelope this year. That's like stays at home.
You feed that to the dogs, hopefully.
Not a chance. If someone's dog tried to eat my antelope, they might be.
I don't. They might. There must be like a drastic difference, like a black and white. Either it's good or it's terrible, or you had COVID and you've lost your sense of taste, or something happened, because the antelope that I have shot, it took. I mean, I just finally had to just grind it up and mix it with bacon bit, and like I couldn't eat it. It tasted like moss that had grown on the top of a rock that had baked in the desert sun, and then some sagebrush had died and fell on it, and the meat got mixed up with that and a little bit of dirt.
Wow. My appreciation for your field preparation skills just went to zero, Corey.
Getting the hide off it quick, getting it on ice. And I have other buddies that are like, antelope is the best meat. I love it. And I'm just like, man, I've taken care of it good. There just must be differences in how antelope taste.
I'm going to just say bad luck on your part. Yeah. You must have got the one out of every 50,000 antelope is foul.
Yeah.
You lucked out.
And I've heard people talk about elk being gamey or elk being tough, and I've never had a single elk, no matter how big, no matter what season. They've all tasted the same, and it's delicious. But man, antelope, I have not had a good experience with antelope. Man, I hear people all the time that, it's the best meat ever. It's tender. It's delicious. You can't even, there's no gamey taste to it. And that hasn't been my experience.
Huh. Well, that's too bad.
Yeah.
I'll fix that up for you.
Okay.
But, we shot mountain caribou last week, and everyone up north is like, you can't shoot those caribou in the rut. That late September, early October, those things are inedible. So Marcus and I donated his back straps and then my tenderloins to the camp cause. And everyone was like, I don't know about this. And so I marinated them for about 8 hours before I cooked it. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, what? You sure this is caribou? Like, I think you guys in your old wives' tales are just full of horse hockey. But
it's just, you got to look at it. How would the rut affect meat? Like, meat is the muscle. It's not like their muscles swell up and get all tough and stringy during the rut. The nasty smell that animals get during the rut is from external glands. It's not mixed in the muscle. So that whole thing about, animals during the rut taste bad and they're tough and, old age, all that. I haven't seen it. Like in any animal, I haven't noticed a difference from one season to the next or, age class. Like you said, it's field preparation. And that's, you leave the hide on an animal for 4 hours, you're going to start noticing it doesn't taste quite the same as when you strip that hide off as soon as you find it. And I know people that'll shoot antelope and just cut them in half and put them in the cooler with the hide and everything on it. And I'm like, man, you're asking for trouble there.
There's also people who will shoot them, gut them, throw them in the back of their truck and run down to the bar and watch a football game and shoot pool for 12 hours while it's 85 degrees out. And then they complain that antelope tastes foul. I'm like, well, go do that with a little steer calf, you know? Shoot a steer calf, maybe gut shoot him, because who knows how well they hit him. And then gut him out, drag him across the prairie for, half mile. Throw this little steer calf in the back of your truck while you're down at the local bar for 10 hours. And then hang him in your garage for another 2 days.
With the hide still on.
With the hide still on. And tell me how good that steer calf tastes.
Yeah.
So, well.
Yeah.
But, no, I'm excited now. I've got Montana elk tag. I've got an Arizona elk tag. And I'll admit that with having moose meat, it's going to take a pretty special situation for me to pull the trigger on an elk right now.
Like one standing in front of you, that special.
Well, maybe I say that, but you know what happens? There's something changes that when you have an animal in your crosshairs, as much as you intended, I don't know if I'm going to shoot him.
Yep.
Once you get in the shooting position and you're practicing your breathing and the crosshairs are steady, instinct just takes over.
It's hard to find a reason not to shoot.
And then a minute later, you're standing there like, who pulled that trigger? that thing's dead over there. Who did that? No, I know. I feel lucky this year to have the meat that I have, and the crew. They're all excited. They're like, "Oh man, Randy's got a moose. We know what that means."
Yep.
So the last time I shot a moose, there's 10 people who work in this building. I think I got a roast and 2 pounds of hamburger before it all disappeared.
When you have a community freezer filled with fresh moose meat, I can only imagine that it probably doesn't last.
No, and that's, part of the benefit of what we do is our crew, some of them don't get to go out and hunt as much as I do.
Yeah.
And, I share with my neighbors, I share with the crew, and I ate a lot of it myself. I've already eaten so much wild game this year. I've eaten all the backstraps and tenderloins off my pronghorn. That's gone. And then the caribou, my tenderloins are gone. Part of one of my backstraps is gone. One of Marcus's backstraps is gone before we even left camp.
Wow.
The moose tenderloins, I cooked those in camp. So I'm, been a good 6 weeks of eating lots of wild game.
That's great.
Yeah. So I'll report back to how my strategy of using hunting pressure is working out.
I can't wait to hear about that and the Arizona. I've never applied or drawn or even looked into the late season hunts in Arizona, but you've kind of piqued my interest a little bit. Once I burn all the points I have on a peak rut hunt, I might have to join you for a Thanksgiving in Arizona. Sounds pretty good.
Mm-hmm. No, it sounds great. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be on December 1st. Because here's the other good part about Arizona opening their elk season December 1st this year, their late rifle hunts. I don't have to frustrate myself by standing in that stupid line that Idaho has, this computerized random line, because I'm going to be in some canyon somewhere that doesn't have Wi-Fi.
Yep.
So
don't you have an Idaho deer tag?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your plan for that?
I'm looking at my calendar trying to think. I tried to turn it back in. Yeah. And they said, no, you can't. Archery season already started.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I thought, well, I'll turn it back in. I'd rather have some other person who's going to have a calendar where they can give it more effort.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that if the archery season's already open, you can't turn it back.
Yep.
So stupid on my part. So I'm trying to carve out a couple of days in November to drive over and do it.
Let me know. I haven't.
You're the one who talked me into it.
I know, and I haven't bought my deer tag yet, so I can buy a deer tag as a resident and drive up there and join you. And it's not too far from where Isaac and Jesse are. And so, yeah.
Well,
let me know.
I'll let you know. And
unfortunately, I do have basketball starting November 10th, so my time away is gonna be limited. But there's weekends, there's Thanksgiving break, I can carve out a few days here and there.
That's admirable of you to continue to coach basketball.
Yeah, I like it.
Appreciate you doing that.
Yeah. I think I install some competitiveness in the kids.
Yeah. Well, I want to come over and just let me coach or give some pointers for one coaching session.
We'd have refs that would be quitting if they heard you were coming to coach our boys. Like, we know what this is going to turn into, and
you got 5 fouls. If you haven't used at least 4 of them, you didn't get your money's worth.
Yeah. No.
I mean, you should have a standing rule that anyone who allows a layup gets benched.
See, and the problem is, with a lot of the younger players today, they use all 5 of their fouls like in the first quarter, but it's because they're lazy and they stand there and they just reach when somebody dribbles by them and they get these ticky-tacky little fouls. There's nobody. There's no Bill Lambier standing underneath the rim waiting for somebody to drive in and slam them to the key. It just doesn't happen anymore.
I don't think I ever got called for a ticky-tacky foul.
No.
I think I got called for... now they have this thing like
intentional flagrant.
I think I would have got a lot of flagrants.
Look at the
back in the
Detroit
day-
Pistons back in the 80s. I mean, the fouls that they're committing, the Jordan rules and all that, the whole team would get ejected. They'd get suspended for the season if they played like that now.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that you do Bill Lane beer and you smash somebody in the face or something. But, you just got to teach these kids that it's kind of like economics 101. You have X amount of assets. The 5 fouls you have are an asset. and it's like a depreciable, perishable asset that goes away at the end of the game. It's not like you get to carry over your fouls to the next game.
Yeah.
And if you don't use 4 of them, you weren't playing very hard.
At least you weren't playing right.
Yeah. I mean, my coach said, Newberg, I expect the other team is going to shoot at least 8 free throws today because you're going to use at least 4 of your fouls. Yes, sir, coach.
And don't use them on ticky-tacky dribble stuff where they get to take it out of bounds and you lose a foul. You make sure that you're using it on shots and they're not making those shots.
Right. After about the second foul, you'd see somebody have a little opening to drive in, and I'd be standing there, and they're like, I think I'll stop and take a quick jump shot from here. And sometimes they'd make them. And that's good. They earned it. Fine for them.
Yep.
But they were going to be shooting free throws if they got within 10 feet of the basket. And I fouled out of a lot of games. I was like, you know what? I'm not like an offensive threat to anybody anyhow. So if I foul out in the third quarter, it's not,
Your annuity has matured.
Yeah. Let me come and coach them for a while.
Yeah. Well, probably won't happen, but
okay.
Just because you'll be busy.
All right. Well, I hope anyone listening who's a basketball coach, you don't let your kids off the floor with a whole bunch of fouls yet in their pocket. It's just that's like coaching malpractice.
Oh man, the game has changed. I guarantee you, the game has. Oh yeah.
Do you guys play zone or man to man?
Well, we play a little of both. I'd love to play man to man the whole game, but typically we're mismatched at some point, and so if we have a team that's not tall and we've got a couple tall players on the other team, sometimes we have to go zone and pack it in against them. I'd love to play man, but sometimes they've got a point guard and a shooter on the other team that we just can't keep up with, and so we've got to go zone and keep the perimeter occupied with defense. And so, it depends. And at that level, you just don't have the luxury usually of having 8 players that can just play ball and play anywhere and allow you to go man defense the whole time.
Yeah, I hated playing zone defense. I just felt like I got lazy when I playing zone defense.
Well, and the problem is you get used to that, and then you realize, or you start thinking, well, I've got somebody behind me that'll stop him if I let him go by, and so you just you get lazy. Your mentality isn't to, hey, this is my guy. Even though you're in a zone, that's why I try to tell them it's still man defense. We're just set up in a zone. If there's a guy in front of you, that's your guy, and you're playing man defense on him. Don't just stand there and wait for him to get position and then get the ball and score and realize, oh, that was my guy. I should have fronted him. And so, it's the hard part for me is when I played like high school basketball, we had like 2 offenses and 1 defense, and that was what we ran every time up and down the floor.
Oh yeah.
Now you have to have like 4 different offenses in one set that you're running through there. And there are times we'll change defense in the middle of a set to try to throw the other team off. And, it's so dynamic and so fast paced that I don't know if I could from a coaching standpoint, I love it, because I'm very methodical and I've got that engineering approach to it. But as a player, man, I don't know if I don't know how well I'd have done at that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of parallels, to sports and to hunting and elk hunting and life.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was MacArthur or Eisenhower who said, upon the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds that on other fields on other days shall bear the fruits of victory. In other words, athletics and sports teach you things that in their military careers were super, super helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that whether it's an individual sport, a team sport, whatever, I think getting your butt whooped now and then, and having someone who's better than you and worked harder than you and kind of hands you your teeth, that's good.
You mean you don't believe in the participation trophies?
We didn't get any participation trophies. The participation trophy we got handed the broom and say, you sweep the floor when the rest of the team's done.
Yep.
You got to participate in janitorial duty is what you got to participate in. So, do they really do that stuff? Or is that just like an urban legend about participation?
No, they do it. There are leagues they don't even keep score in. There are baseball, little peewee football leagues. They don't even keep score because they don't want to make one team feel like they've lost.
You're kidding me.
No, I heard somebody, I think it was a comedian or something, talking about it, but he showed up at a game and his buddy was there. He's like, hey, what's the score? And some lady up behind him said, we don't keep score in this league. It's fun. It's for fun. And his buddy said, well, we've had fun 11 times and they've had fun 4 times. So,
I mean, you might be onto something, Corey. Maybe states will start selling participation tags.
Oh, well, you already have that. You hear people complain that it's national forest land. They should be able to go and hunt it anytime they want. And, it doesn't matter what state it's in. Well, you've got a participation tag. You can go and hike around anytime you want. The animal belongs to the state, though, and to actually hunt and kill an animal, you have to have an actual harvest tag, and that's different.
Well, I know how we got on this tangent. It had nothing to do with elk hunting.
Well, it does. Everything has to do with elk hunting.
Well, true. Yeah. Everything has to do with elk hunting.
That's right.
Where I was in camp up in the Yukon, I was the only guy there with the guides being real young and everything that was over 33 or 35 years old. So
you're more than a week or two above that.
Yeah, I laid out such good marriage advice. I'm like, why are we not recording a podcast? This is like gold. And I don't think any of them believed one bit of it. So I'm like, well, you guys just have to figure it out yourself then. Yeah. Why do I hunt 100 days a year and you guys are doing honeydews and saying, oh, I can't, sorry, boss, I got to get home this week. And, well,
you laid it out for them, huh?
Mm-hmm. Just black and white. Like, look, there's this thing called compatibility and incompatibility. It sounds to me like we have an incompatibility issue here, and she should go find another fit.
Wow. Well, hopefully that's pre-marriage advice.
Well, yeah, it was pre-marriage advice.
Okay, because marital advice, if you give that marital advice, that's not going to be helpful.
True. I'd say the best marriage advice is premarital advice.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. I agree.
The best marital advice once you're married is learn to say, yes, dear, you're right.
Yes.
And absolutely. I have not learned that one yet. My wife will probably listen to this podcast. And if I said that's the best advice, she would call me out on it and say, well, you haven't learned that one yet. I admit that.
So while we are doing this podcast, I have a friend in town from Alaska who is one of the handiest guys you'll ever meet. He built his own house.
Wow.
So he's staying at our house for the last 2 nights, and he notices that our faucet is dripping. And this has been a bone of contention for my wife and I for like 12 years.
So I'm like, well, just turn
it over to the left and push down on it on the hot setting. Problem solved. If you leave it over on the cold side, it runs like the toilet's flushed or something. Well, my buddy Jim is like, Randy, why don't you fix that faucet for her? I'm like, I've told her to call a plumber 100 times. She won't call a plumber. So guess what they're doing right now?
He fixed it?
Last night, he said, this is like a 3-minute fix. So he started on it at like 4 o'clock, and we had dinner reservations at 6 o'clock. So he had to stop to go eat dinner. And then he had a little bit too much wine. So he's like, I better work on this in the morning. So I get a text message this morning. Hey, where's the toolkit? We're running down to Home Depot. We're getting a whole new faucet. We're not going to replace the little, whatever they are, like cylinder or whatever. She's getting a whole new faucet out of this, it sounds like.
Wow.
So, don't be handy.
Well, the problem is you've got a handy guy staying at your house.
I know.
Now your wife's expectations are going to change.
No, she had no expectations. she now is like, when you go to Alaska and stay with Jim, you should do this for him, or you should do that. Yeah, I'll do that, honey. You're darn right. Doesn't require any handiwork. I'll do that. I'll pack his deer. I'll whatever.
I'll help him with his taxes.
Yeah, he's fixed a leaky faucet probably. So
something that's been going on as a point of contention for 12 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's kind of the marriage advice to that is make a list and tell the other spouse, just call the man, pay the man, get it fixed, pay the man.
See, and you have a valid point there. But on the flip side of that, I'm somewhat handy. I can fix some things, and my wife always has a honeydew list, a preseason honeydew list. But that's my ticket. If I get all those things done, then she's willing to say, I won't fuss when you're gone for several weeks hunting. There's that trade-off. I earn that time off.
Hold on, let's back up here.
What are you doing to earn your 100 days of fall?
All of us have a preseason honeydew list, Corey.
Don't say that.
There is nobody listening to this podcast who does not have a preseason honeydew list.
Don't say that. My wife's going to hear that, and she thinks that I'm special.
You're not. Here's the flaw in your logic. You say, I'm handy, and I can save some money. I'm going to go fix all this, and my wife is going to think I'm the dearest guy around. I'm going to get to hunt for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I say, if I do this and something doesn't get repaired completely correctly and properly, I'm going to be the one who gets a phone call on week 3 to come home and cancel the rest of my elk hunt to fix the crapper that is still leaking or something.
Well,
I pay the man, so when it isn't a completely good repair, she picks up the phone and says, hey, Tony, come on down, fix this. Lenny, hey, the oven is still not working. I don't get the phone call.
Yeah.
I'm out hunting. So,
well, my grandma used to always say, if you have time to do a job twice, you had time to do it right the first time.
Well, sometimes you don't have the tools or the mental capability or just the... I don't have the mental fortitude to focus on it because I'm too busy swearing and cussing and saying, hey, the man. My good friend Mark Hervinen in Marquette, Michigan, has a saying. It's called pay the man. He says, I don't even argue about this stuff anymore. I just pay the man. So when the topic comes up, I tell my wife, pay the man.
Yep. And there's some, auto mechanics. I don't work on vehicles. Because I don't know how. It's frustrating, and I'm the same way there. It's worth more for me to pay somebody that knows what they're doing than for me to spend my time trying to figure it out.
Right.
So
yeah, I made my livelihood telling people, pay me, I'll take care of your tax headache. I'll save you money. You won't get audited. I'll take care of all those headaches. So how hypocritical or ironic would it be if I said, well, I'm not going to pay some expert. I'm going to figure it out myself. And, a little duct tape, bale and twine, and a little JB Weld, we got everything fixed there.
I see your point. But what happens if you are a handyman?
Don't be handy.
But
don't tell anybody if you are.
Well, that's just hard. I mean, if you're a home builder, you know that you know how to build houses. And if you know how to build houses, you probably know how to fix most of the things that go wrong in a house.
Yeah, but if you build a house, you probably got subcontractors or a crew to come and fix that stuff for you while you're hunting. Yeah. Honey, Joe's going to be over here to fix that window that doesn't shut all the way.
Well, to my wife's credit, she just makes a list. And when I do get home, that's when I fix it. She doesn't expect me to come home from hunting to fix it. So
I have a list that is so long. I'm like, well, we either need a fire or a new house, honey.
That list has been a point of contention for 12 years.
Yeah, we've been in this house 19 years. It's like, darn, we either need a new house or we just need to hope the lightning strikes and we need a fire or something.
Because that list is just too long to tackle now.
Yeah. Now she throws parts of it away. She's like, well, you're never going to get to this. I'm like, you're right. I'm not. Call the man. Pay the man. I hunt and I fish. I didn't work 35 years at that desk, chained to that desk, to have to mow the grass and fix broken windows and leaky gutters and stuff like that. So I hunt.
There you go.
So
what about somebody who's young, who maybe finances don't afford them the opportunity to pay the man for everything, so they have to learn to figure it out? What's your marital advice there?
Then my marital advice is do what I did. Stay at the office and work harder and earn more overtime or more bonuses and pay the man. Or go trap beaver or go cut firewood. Do something else to make more money and pay the man.
I'm not going to fix that leaky faucet, dear. I'm going to be out trapping beaver all weekend, and we'll figure it out when I get back.
There is no leaky faucet in my house more important than me going out and trapping beaver. There is not. So I just don't know what to tell people. I've been married. I'm coming up on my 35th wedding anniversary here in a few months.
Your poor wife.
So, yeah, I know.
I can say the same for mine too. And that's
you got to think this stuff through before you get yourself all hopped up and in a hurry. If you're like a raghorn bull in the rut and you're not paying attention to anything, you could meet your demise. You got to have a little bit.
How did you woo your wife? How did you get her to even notice you?
Hey, she all I can figure is she must have just really been on a down day or something. Her self-esteem must have really been in the crapper that day.
Because I just think that most of us have to show some level of competency just to be able to convince, a female or a potential spouse that we're a catch. I mean, it certainly isn't. We can't rely on good looks or
I don't have
money
that.
or
I didn't have that.
Yeah, so
my wife when we first met, my wife was making more than twice what I was making.
Yeah, I was an engineer, and my wife had more money in savings than I did when we met and got married.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I married my wife for her money. She knows that. she says that all the time. I mean, in 1986 or whatever it was, 87, she's making $40,000 a year. I thought, holy cow, how do you make that kind of money? I'll never make that kind of money. I better grab tight here. And so, anyhow.
So you kidnapped her. I mean, you brought nothing to the table.
Zero.
What would your buddy say that you worked with? You bring nothing to the table. She can't replace by noon tomorrow or something?
Yeah, that's what he said. Don Bowman, he said, she could replace you by noon tomorrow.
Yeah.
Behave accordingly. So
you didn't have looks, you didn't have money, you didn't have anything there. I mean, you kidnapped her.
I analyzed this, and her dad was a very poor provider. So she was looking for someone who was a provider. So on like our third date, I just thought, well, I better tell her I hunt a lot. I don't want to drop that one after we get pretty far down the road here. She's like, oh, really? My uncle used to hunt, but no one else in my family hunts, and I'd really like to try some deer meat if you ever had some. So like the third date, I come with a whole grocery bag full of deer burger. I'm a provider, man. You aren't going to starve to death if you hang out with me.
So you brought talent to the table. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. She was telling that story last night to my buddy Jim. She's like, you aren't going to believe this. On like the third date, Randy shows up at my apartment, and my sister, the fashion model, is there. And when Randy leaves, she's like, he brought you deer meat? What the hell are you hanging out with this guy for? Here we are.
Happily married 35 years later.
Yeah. And took her hunting all the time, took her fishing all the time. We had a deal that we hunt and fish every weekend. And if you want to go, there's an open invitation. My buddies don't get to go if you want to go. But if you don't want to go, I'm not staying home and mowing the grass or fixing the light fixture. So, problem solved.
Yeah. So I think you said something at the beginning of the marital advice section here of the podcast. Premarital advice is the best marital advice you can get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because once you go down that road and figure out that you're not going hunting this weekend, it's I know a lot of people in that situation, and it's it's difficult. It can be sad, and then the only way to navigate that is you've got to give up something. And
it's a bummer. That's why once you've tied the knot. So before you're going into this, just understand it's way easier to get married than it is to get unmarried. Okay. It's way more expensive, way more complicated, way more painful. So you never want to get yourself in the situation where getting unmarried is the solution, first of all. If you've got yourself in a situation where, like, man, I don't get to hunt 100 days a year, well, that's the best advice, the post-marriage advice or post-wedding advice is peace, not justice.
Yeah.
So, and then there's some.
Do you want to be right?
Some other.
Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy?
Exactly. So here's some other like profiling things you can do. Okay. I always said that if my wife wanted a big, expensive wedding, she probably wasn't for me, because I'm a tight ass accountant, right? And I don't have any money to throw a big wedding, and I don't have parents that had enough money to probably drive to the wedding. So I thought, well, I'm going to tell her we're eloping and see what the response was. Because she's like, we should get married. We should get married. Yeah. Finally, I came to my senses and realized what a catch I had in the net. And I'm like, boy, I better get this fish in the boat. There's a lot of other people trolling their lures around here. I better get this fish in the boat. And so I said, you want to get married on Saturday? No, I didn't say you want to. I said, I think we're getting married on Saturday. She's like, what? I'm like, well, you said you want to get married. It's Sunday. We got till next Saturday. She's like, well, my parents can't get here. Your parents can't. I'm like, that's the point. She was good with it. I'm like, you know what? If this woman is willing to forego a wedding and all that kind of jazz and not put me through the stress of picking out the photographer and the flower colors and me imposing on all my buddies to say, hey, all 8 of you, would you come and, spend $400 on a tux and fly into town and da-da-da? I'm not going to ask my buddies to do that. And I'm certainly not going to ask them to do that in September or October or November.
Yeah, that goes beyond marriage advice there. That's just...
So that was the other part. I thought, if she's willing to get married in the winter, she's like, I knew she was a keeper to start with. But when I said we're going to elope and we're going to elope in the winter and we're not going to have a honeymoon until tax season's over sometime in May. And she was like, okay. I'm like, holy cow, Randy, you aren't... she is so far up the rung of the ladder from where you are, you didn't even know the ladder went that high. So
she had very low expectations.
That's all I can figure.
Yeah.
She must have had, some sort of bad experiences where she said, well, this is about as good as it's going to get, I guess. I mean... Well,
and now you hunt 100 days a year. There are a lot of people listening to this that are trying to figure out how they can go for 7 days straight.
I know.
And keep peace at home.
I know. That requires effort and sacrifice and compromise, because the rest of the year, the other 265 days of the year, if Kim says, hey, I want to go to whatever city and I want to go to the opera, I wouldn't go to the opera if you put a gun at my head, other than if my wife asked me to go there.
No, I thought you were going to say, yes, dear, I bought you tickets and you and your sister can go.
That's what I do. No, I've tried that before, but sometimes she'll say, I want you to be there and I want you to smile. Yes, ma'am. So that's compromise, right? That's like sacrifice, compromise. This is a partnership. It's not all you and it's not all the other. So when it's about me, it's hunting season. The other 265 days a year, I look at it like, look, I'm only gone 40% of the year. The other 60% is all yours, darling. Just don't ask me to fix
I'm giving more than I'm taking.
Yeah. This is a 40-60 deal. We split it right down the middle, 40-60.
Yep. Then you're getting the better end of the deal for sure.
Yeah. Don't ask me how we just spent 25 minutes talking about this, but it's really important.
You were worked
if you want to be...
You've got some energy behind this. I can tell that you've recently discussed it. And
I have.
yeah.
My poor camera crew was in my truck for 35 hours driving back from the northern parts of the Yukon, having to listen to all the remnants of what I laid down some real gold at camp, but I even had I thought some of my best work was on the way home.
Yeah. Well, you've got a captive audience. They can't get away.
What are they going to do? Get out and walk?
Yeah.
So
they probably need therapy now. They need to go to counseling now just after that 35-hour road trip.
And if you're the woman listening to this, and you like to hunt, you just got to tell them where the bear poops in the woods. This is how it's going to be. If you think I'm having kids and raising these babies while you're going out hunting, nah, I'm going out hunting too. So we better figure this out.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just how it goes.
Yeah. Man, you need your own TV show.
I don't know who would watch. But.
It'd be entertaining at least. Even, there's like Dr. Laura. I've stumbled across that a couple. Dr. Laura on Sirius XM. I found that somehow and listened for about 3 minutes. And man, she's so snappy, and her way is the only way. So opinionated, and she cuts people off before they even share any of the facts. And evidently, she has a show and people listen. So I think you'd do well.
I wouldn't cut people off.
No.
I want to hear the whole details of everything.
Totally. No, that's what I mean.
If anyone wants to know what a post-recovering CPA is like, you just heard it in the last 25 minutes. Because being a CPA is way more marriage counseling than it is tax advice.
That's true.
So
that is true.
Anyhow, it's hunting season. I hope that you pay the man and you go hunting. Don't be working on the plumbing. That plumbing's still going to be there in January when season over. And you don't got to mow the lawn because there's going to be snow over it in January. They'd worry about it in May.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there is some value in your marriage advice somewhere.
Some value. I was hoping you were going to say, Randy, you should bottle that stuff and sell it. But obviously I didn't.
There's definitely portions of that could be bottled and sold.
Yeah, I think if people listen to country music, old time country music about all the woe is me and mama got run over by a train and your girlfriend left you at the bar, there's lessons in that stuff that apply to hunting, and that's why I listen to Willie's Roadhouse out there on my XM radio.
See, that's
So, but anyhow.
Yeah,
we didn't get to the only viewer question or listener question we got to is when you were asking me about hunting that really dark stuff, because we had an email that came in the other day where someone asked pretty much a similar question saying, hey, where are they going to be feeding? What are they going to be doing? I'm going to be there, the first part of the second season in October. I don't want to go in there and mess them up. And it was very similar to your question. Other than, I think this person said there are only a few openings. Well, find one of those few openings and shoot them when they're there.
Yeah. I did see an email that came through that I was meant to ask you about, and we're 2 hours deep here, so we probably don't have time to go through all of them. But it was somebody from Minnesota, and they were talking about the Minnesota Game and Fish Department not allowing the elk population there to expand anymore because of the damage they're doing to crops, and what can be done in states like that where, we're trying to build a bigger pie and expand elk hunting opportunities, but there's some states that are fighting it because they're concerned about landowner concerns and damage.
Yeah. And right now where the elk are in northwest Minnesota is all grain farming mostly. It's a heavily intensive agricultural area, and along the fringe where the forest meets that is where the elk hang out. And I think they have a cap in Minnesota. They have an objective of 200 or 300 animals. But there's a lot of other places in Minnesota where elk could be. Up in the northeast part, it's not great habitat, but there's enough habitat opened up by logging and other stuff that would be there. The other part is the Fond du Lac Reservation outside of Duluth is working on an elk reintroduction plan. So there's a possibility there. It really, in a case like that, whatever state it is, some states agriculture is like king. And that's what's going to rule the day in the legislature, within the agency, whatever. And so you got to find ways to work within that. I don't. Every state has a different answer to that. Having grown up there, just a little bit east of where those elk are, I get that email a lot. Hey, you're from Minnesota. What do you think of this? I'm like, well, you got a political problem, not a biological problem, because the subspecies of Manitoba elk used to inhabit all of western Minnesota. That was all native. Where these elk are, were native elk. That was amazing native elk habitat. So it's not that elk were never there. It's not that there's not elk habitat there.
We came and encroached on their habitat, and now they're they don't have the same habitat, or at least the same opportunities to the habitat.
Yeah, and if it's the tribes who end up reintroducing them, you know what? Jump in, help the tribes do it. Because if you think those elk
are going to stay on imaginary lines on a map,
not a chance. So I don't know. I mean, Wisconsin reintroduced elk, and they're even more of an agricultural state than Minnesota. Kentucky reintroduced elk. They're every bit of an agricultural state, and now Kentucky has 14,000 elk.
Yeah.
Well, I think now they've chiseled it down. It's more closer to 10,000. But
do you know there's elk in Texas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, West Texas has elk.
A lot of elk and big elk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's pretty much all private. But
that's the problem. You can shoot them because they're invasive species there. So there's not even a season tags, anything like that in some of it. But like you said, it's private, and the private landowners know the value of an elk. And Minnesota being as much where this elk habitat is so much private, I don't know how you get those landowners on board. Yeah.
If you say, look, we'll pay you crop damage. I mean, the Kentucky route was, we're 91% private, 9% public. We're going to have to give some of these bull tags to landowners to sell or to donate or whatever they're going to do. And out west, we'd like, no, we don't need to do that. We got all kinds of land for elk to live on. But I understand if that's what it takes to get elk on the landscape, you know what? You can't take the Idaho or Montana or Wyoming or whatever, Nevada solution and try to make that the same solution in a heavily privatized, intensive agricultural state in the Midwest. You're going to have to come up with different ideas. And so, I hope they do it, because have you seen some of those bulls they do kill out of that Minnesota herd?
No, do they hunt them?
Oh, yeah, they hunt them. I think they give away like 10 tags a year or something like that. This year they shot just a couple lunkers, and a few years ago they shot one over 400 inches. But I'll never draw because it's open to residents only.
Yeah, for now.
And, probably for now and for as long as I'm going to be alive. So, oh well.
Yeah, no, it made me think of you, and I saw that email.
So I hope they do it. I mean, Michigan has elk, Wisconsin has elk, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia.
20 years ago, maybe one or two of those states had elk.
Yeah, you would have never dreamed that there'd be the number of elk east of the Mississippi as there is now. So none of that happened easily. It took a lot of time, a lot of effort, advocacy by hunters and people who love wildlife, advocacy by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, money from state agencies, from hunters, from RMEF and others. It didn't none of those successes that we celebrate happened just like, oh yeah, I think I'll do that, and it was done.
Yeah.
Anything worth having in the terms of wildlife and conservation, it's never easy, it's never comfortable, and it's always inconvenient. Those are my 3 points of conservation.
Yep.
So. Well, Corey, I better let you go if you're going to go get your neck straightened out, or maybe you're going to go pop a wheelie and do an Evel Knievel or something. Let me know if you're going to do that. I'll drive over to Donnelly and sell hot dogs at the Corey Jacobson Evel Knievel display.
No, I won't be doing that. I used to think that, man, if you wrecked a motorcycle and had sore muscles, the best thing to do is just get back on and ride it, and they'll loosen back up. But I'm realizing after a couple weeks here of packing a backpack and continuing to ride a motorcycle, that's not the solution anymore.
Yeah. Well, we've been on the phone. I got a text from Bo Beatty saying, "Hey, instead of 4 llamas, I'm sending you 6."
Good. Well, you'll have 4 of them broke in and trained for me when I pick them up here in a week and a half.
Yeah. Well, I have this spare lot. You've seen my setup out at my house. I stake them out over in the spare lot. And this afternoon, when word gets out that Randy's got the llamas, it'll be a petting zoo over at my house. Strangers show up, people show up. I'm like, hello, this is private property, and llamas hate dogs. The llamas and dogs don't get along. So people show up with their dogs. I'm like, you might want to get this dog out of here if you want it to have its teeth much longer.
Yeah.
Oh well. I'm heading
great.
in tomorrow, so I won't have the petting zoo set up for too long.
That's good.
So,
okay.
Anyhow.
Well, I'm excited to hear how it goes, and then we probably won't connect before I get out. So when I get back, we can connect and report on our transitionary post-rut to late season hunting adventures.
I'm hunting a way easier period of the elk calendar, the first part of the post-rut, than you are with the later part of the post-rut. So I have far fewer excuses for not running into elk than you do. You have like the whole book of excuses are available to you.
That is good to hear.
I only got like three chapters of the book are available to me.
No.
So
hopefully I don't have to use too many of them, but yeah, we'll catch up and report, and good luck to you.
Same to you, Corey. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for being here, folks.